She was not supposed to be here. Not in this hotel. Not in this city. Not in this country. Not carrying a drinks tray through a room full of people who would never know her name. And she was certainly not supposed to be walking toward table 7 with her back straight, and her face composed, and her heart completely, surgically shut, when she set the glass down and turned to leave and heard a voice say her name. One word. Her name. And the entire architecture of a life she had spent 8 months building, brick by careful brick, with bleeding hands and zero help, cracked straight down the middle. She turned slowly, and there he was, Park Junho, sitting at the head of table 7 in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, looking at her like a man who had just seen a ghost that he himself had failed to save. His face, that face she had trained herself to fold away and put in a drawer every time it surfaced, was open in a way she had never seen it in public. No bordro mask, no paliskimpoche, just shock and something that looked dangerously close to grief. Maya Johnson looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, in the steadiest voice she had ever produced in her entire 28 years of living, "Good evening, sir. Enjoy your dinner." And she walked away. Her hands did not shake, not even slightly. And somehow, that was the most heartbreaking thing in the room. If this story already has you feeling something good, hit that subscribe button right now and tap the like button so more people can find this story. This one is going to stay with you. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Maya Johnson arrived in Seoul on a Tuesday in October with 2 suitcases, a job offer from an international trade firm, and the specific fearlessness of a woman from Atlanta who had decided, at 25, that her life needed more continent in it. She was not running from anything. That matters. Some people come to foreign countries dragging their wounds behind them like luggage. Maya came carrying ambition. There is a difference, and you could see it in the way she walked, like someone who expected the city to be interesting and was prepared to be interesting back. She met Park Junho at a business conference 8 months after she arrived. He was giving a keynote. She was in the 3rd row taking notes, and at some point she stopped taking notes and started watching him. Not because he was beautiful, though he was, but because he was arguing a position she disagreed with, and he was arguing it brilliantly, and something in her brain woke up like a dog that had been waiting for a walk. She found him at the networking session afterward and told him exactly where his 3rd point fell apart. He stared at her for a moment. Then he laughed, not politely, not professionally, but genuinely with his head back, and said, "Nobody has said that to me in 4 years. Everyone just agrees." "That sounds exhausting," Maya said. "It is," he said. And then, "Can I buy you coffee?" They talked for 3 hours. They argued for 2 of them. By the time the venue staff started stacking chairs around them, they had covered trade policy, whether kimchi genuinely improved everything it touched, Maya's position, almost but not rice, his position, especially rice, debate ongoing, the particular loneliness of being professionally excellent in a room that only sees your title, and what their respective mothers had said when they each announced they were going into international business. His mother had said, "Make sure the family name is respected." Maya's mother had said, "Make sure you can pay your own bills before you pay anybody else's." "I like your mother," Junho said. "She would terrify you," Maya said. "Probably," he agreed, and smiled at her in a way that made the next 18 months feel inevitable. They were not an easy couple. They were the kind of couple that worked precisely because neither of them would let the other get away with anything. He challenged her professionally. She refused to be impressed by his money, which confused him initially and then became one of his favorite things about her. She cooked jollof rice on Sundays and played Afrobeats when she cleaned and called her mother in Atlanta every Thursday without fail, and Junho learned very quickly that Thursday evenings were sacred and immovable, and if he had plans, he needed to make them for Friday. "You talk to your mother every week?" he asked once, bemused. "Every Thursday," Maya corrected, "without fail. For my entire adult life. My mother and I speak at family dinners." Maya looked at him with the particular patience of a woman deciding whether to open a whole door or just crack it. She cracked it. "How's that working out for your emotional availability?" He had no answer, but he thought about it for 3 days, which was itself an answer. He proposed after 14 months. Not publicly, not with a grand gesture. They were in her apartment, in the middle of a disagreement about whether he had been dismissive at a dinner with her colleagues. He had been, mildly, and he knew it, and he stopped mid-sentence, looked at her, and said, "I want to argue with you for the rest of my life. Officially, will you let me?" Maya stared at him. That is the least romantic proposal in human history. "I know. I had something better planned for next month, but I can't wait, and you're standing there being right, and will you marry me? Yes or no?" She said yes. And then, because she was Maya, "You were dismissive." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry." And he meant both things. She was happy. Genuinely, quietly, fully happy. That matters too. Remember it. Because happiness, when it is real, makes what comes next so much worse. The New York assignment arrived 6 weeks after the proposal. 12 months overseeing a major acquisition. The kind of opportunity that professionally Junho could not and should not refuse. He told Maya over dinner, watching her face. She was quiet for a moment. Then, okay. Long distance is hard, but it's not impossible. We'll figure out the calls, the visits. I want you to stay at the family home, he said. The quiet that followed was a different kind of quiet. Junho. I know, but you'd be alone in your apartment for 12 months in a city that isn't your home country, and I'd be on the other side of the world worrying Your mother doesn't like me. She doesn't know you yet. Maya looked at him steadily. She knows me enough. I've seen the way she looks at me when she thinks you're not watching. She'll come around. She just needs time with you, without me in the room, making her feel like she's being evaluated. If you're there, just the two of you, family, she'll see who you are. Maya wanted to say, that is a beautiful theory, and I don't believe a word of it. What she said instead was, if this goes wrong, it will not be my fault. It won't go wrong. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who laughed with his whole chest and argued with genuine respect, and had once driven 40 minutes at midnight to bring her the specific brand of tea she'd mentioned offhand 3 weeks earlier, because she had a cold. This man she loved with a completeness that still occasionally surprised her. Okay, she said again. But I'm bringing my speaker. Of course. And my Falcons mug. Obviously. And if your mother tries to serve me rice without the stew separately, I'm staging a diplomatic incident. He laughed. She let herself laugh, too. Neither of them knew it was one of the last genuinely easy moments they would have for a very long time. He left on a Thursday. The airport goodbye was quiet. No performance, just two people who expected to see each other soon. Maya moved her 2 suitcases into the Park family guest room and arranged her Falcons mug on the nightstand. Mrs. Park appeared in the doorway, smiled with the warmth of a woman who has practiced warmth until it is indistinguishable from the real thing, and said good night. The door closed. The smile disappeared from Mrs. Park's face as she walked down the hallway. Like a light switched off. And the thing that Maya could not have known, sitting in that guest room with her speaker and her mug, texting Junho that she was settled in, was that Mrs. Park had a small notebook in her private sitting room downstairs. And in that notebook was a list. And the first item on that list was already underway. What began in that house was not rage. It was not even cruelty exactly. It was something colder and more deliberate than either. The systematic, patient dismantling of a woman, conducted by someone who had decided, long before Maya arrived, that she simply could not be allowed to stay. Mrs. Park had chosen CEO Yuna for her son 2 years before he met Maya. Yuna, daughter of a well-connected business family, educated in Paris, elegant, undemanding, perfectly positioned to consolidate the Park family's social standing in exactly the direction Mrs. Park had been engineering for a decade. Yuna was not a person to Mrs. Park, not really. She was a strategy wearing a silk dress. And then Maya Johnson walked into a conference room in Seoul and argued her son into a 3-hour conversation, and the strategy became irrelevant overnight. That was what Mrs. Park could not forgive. Not Maya's nationality, not her culture, not her jollof rice or her Afrobeats or her Atlanta Falcons mug. What she could not forgive was that Maya was extraordinary enough to make the plan unnecessary. That a woman she had never chosen had simply outmattered the woman she had. Control, once lost, had to be reclaimed. That was simply how things worked. Week 1. Maya came down to breakfast to find the table set for 3, Mrs. Park, Jisoo, in a space that was not quite set for 4. The housekeeper, Mrs. O, brought out food without acknowledgement. Maya sat and reached for the rice. Mrs. Park said, pleasantly, "Oh, we weren't sure what you want to eat. Your preferences are probably quite different from ours." A smile. "Mrs. O can make you something separately." It was said with perfect warmth. It was also clearly offense. Maya looked at her future mother-in-law and said, equally pleasantly, "Rice is fine. Thank you. I've been eating it my whole life." She served herself. The fence was declined. Mrs. Park smiled and said nothing. In her notebook that evening, she drew a small note beside Item 1, resistant. Adjust approach. Week 2, Maya's remote work calls began dropping. Not always, just often enough to be disruptive, not often enough to be undeniable. The Wi-Fi in her room was on a separate router, managed by Mrs. O, who had worked for this family for 11 years and understood, without being told directly, that her job security was not unrelated to her loyalty. Maya mentioned it to Junho on their evening call, one of the last reliable ones. He said he'd look into it. He mentioned it to his mother. His mother said she'd have the router checked. She had Mrs. O reset it once, which fixed nothing, and then reported back to Junho that it had been resolved. It had not been resolved. Week 3, Junho's calls began arriving inconsistently. Maya would wait at the agreed time, and the call wouldn't come until 2 hours later, or sometimes the next morning with a brief text. Acquisition meeting ran late. Sorry, talk tomorrow. She told herself it was the acquisition pressure. She was not wrong. Exactly, the acquisition was genuinely consuming him. What she didn't know was that Mrs. Park had begun calling Junho at the precise times he and Maya had agreed to speak, with questions and concerns and family matters that required his attention. Nothing dramatic, just consistently timed interruptions, delivered by a mother he trusted and a calendar she had learned. And separately, in conversations that sounded like nothing, Mrs. Park began planting. "Junho, Maya seems a little restless lately. I think she might be missing home. I'm sure it's nothing. She's a strong girl." A pause. "I just want you to be aware." "What do you mean restless?" "Oh, nothing specific. She just seems, I don't know, like someone who isn't quite settled. But don't worry. We're taking good care of her." The seed was small. Seeds always are. That's the point. Junho filed it with quiet worry rather than direct confrontation, because his instinct, trained by a family that managed everything internally and quietly, was not to alarm anyone until he had evidence. He told himself he'd pay more attention to her messages. He'd be more present. What he didn't realize was that the messages he was receiving were already being shaped. Maya, by month 2, felt the distance but could not name its exact source. She called her mother on a Thursday. "How's it going over there?" "It's fine. It's an adjustment." "Whose adjustment? Yours or theirs?" Maya paused. "Both, I think." "Maya, Mama, I'm handling it." "I know you're handling it. You handle everything. I'm asking if you're okay." A longer pause. Outside the window, Seoul was lit and indifferent and beautiful. "I am okay. Sometimes I feel like I'm speaking a language everyone understands except me. And I don't mean Korean." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then, "You call me the second that feeling gets louder than the good parts. You hear me?" "I hear you. And tell that man to call you more." "Mama, I'm just saying, distance is a choice too, sometimes." After she hung up, Maya sat with that for a while. Then she pushed it into a drawer, the same drawer she was developing for things she couldn't fix right now, and went to sleep. Month 3, a Tuesday evening. Junho's last 3 messages had been brief, work-focused, resolved. She told herself it was fine. She told herself this several times a day now, which, if she'd been watching herself from outside, would have been a signal. At dinner that night, Jisoo mentioned a family gathering the following weekend. Extended family, a birthday celebration for a cousin. Maya was not mentioned as attending. When Maya asked, Mrs. Park said, warmly, "Oh, it's a very traditional event. Lots of older relatives. We thought it might be uncomfortable for you. We didn't want you to feel out of place." A smile. "We were looking out for you." Maya looked at her across the dinner table and understood, with the clarity of a woman who had been paying careful attention for 3 months, that she was being disappeared. Gradually, politely, room by room, event by event, meal by meal, until the house no longer contained her at all. She said evenly, "I'd like to come." Mrs. Park said, warmly, "Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable." At the gathering, the geometry was impeccable. Maya was seated at the far end of the family table. 2 seats from her was someone she did not recognize at first, a woman in a pale blue dress who carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had always belonged. Their eyes met briefly. The woman looked away. Mrs. Park, at the center of the table, touched the woman's arm and said something that made her smile. Maya leaned toward Jisoo and asked quietly, "Who is that?" Jisoo glanced up, a fraction of a second too long before answering. "Co Yuna. Family friend. Close family friend. Our families have known each other for a long time." Maya looked at Yuna, looked at Mrs. Park, looked at the geometry of the table. Mrs. Park between Yuna and Junho's empty chair as though the space were already allocated. She understood then. Not everything, but enough. That night, she tried to call Junho. The call dropped. She tried again, dropped again. On the 3rd attempt it connected, but broke into fragments, his voice arriving in pieces, her responses apparently not reaching him. She sent a text. "We need to talk. Something doesn't feel right here." He replied 4 hours later. "Sorry, terrible signal lately. All okay? Miss you." She stared at the message for a long time. She typed and deleted 3 different responses. Finally she sent, "Miss you too. Sleep well." She did not sleep. Month 4. The blow. It began with the money. Not a large amount. Enough to be serious. 300,000 won from the household account, documented on a withdrawal record with a timestamp from a day Maya had been home alone with Mrs. O while Mrs. Park and Jisoo were out. Mrs. Park came to Maya's room the following evening. She sat down. Her voice was the warmest it had ever been, which should have been the tell. "Maya, I need to talk to you about something sensitive. I'm not accusing you. I just think you should know what's being said, so there are no surprises." She explained the missing money. She showed the record. She said, "Mrs. O noticed, and she came to me. I'm sure there's an explanation." Maya looked at the record. She looked at Mrs. Park. Her chest was completely calm and completely cold, the way a room gets right before a storm arrives. "I didn't take anything from this house." "Of course," Mrs. Park said. "I believe you. I just wanted you to hear it from me first before, well." She left the implication hovering. 2 days later, the family meeting. Mrs. Park, Jisoo, Mrs. O. The dining table that had excluded Maya all these months now staged for her specifically. The manufactured paper trail, withdrawal records, account discrepancies, a timeline constructed with the precision of someone who had done their research. Maya fought back, clearly, specifically, intelligently, asking for full, unedited records, pointing out the gaps in the timeline, naming the impossibility of the accusation given her documented movements. She was not panicking. She was not crying. She was dismantling the case point by point with the analytical clarity that had made her excellent at her job. Mrs. Park listened to all of it with the patience of someone who knows they have one more card to play. Then she placed Maya's phone on the table. "Before you continue," she said, "I think you should look at something." Maya picked up her own phone, opened the screen. It was already on a message thread. Junho's name, Junho's profile photo, the familiar blue bubbles of their conversation. But the messages at the bottom of the thread were ones she had never seen. She read them slowly. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us. About whether we moved too fast. A week later, my mother raised some concerns I can't ignore. I think we need to be honest with each other when I'm back. 2 weeks after that, the most recent, I think space might be good for both of us right now. I'll call when I have clarity." Maya sat very still. She thought about the drop calls. She thought about the brief messages. She thought about month 3 when his responses became short and resolving. She thought about Mrs. Park's voice saying he seems restless. "I think she misses home. I'm sure it's nothing." She thought about the specific, surgical patience with which the past 4 months had been constructed. The ground was prepared. The seeds were watered. and the final blow landed in soil that had been worked for exactly this moment. "These messages are 2 weeks old," Maya said. Her voice was very quiet. "Yes," Mrs. Park said. "I am sorry." Maya looked at Jisoo. Jisoo looked at the table. Maya understood several things simultaneously with the brutal clarity of someone in shock whose mind is still, infuriatingly, working. That the messages were fabricated. They had to be that it didn't sound like him, but that she had no way to prove it. Not here, not now. That Mrs. O had access to her phone because Maya had once asked her to charge it in the kitchen. That the dropped calls, the brief messages, the planted seeds of doubt had all been designed to make these fabricated words feel like confirmation of something she had already half suspected. She had been set up for months, and the trap closed perfectly. "You can leave quietly," Mrs. Park said. Her voice was not cruel. It was almost kind, which was the cruelest thing about it. "Where this accusation goes to Junho's company board. A theft charge against his foreign fiancée would be complicated. For him, for his professional standing. I know you care about him. I'm giving you a choice because I respect that." Maya looked at her future mother-in-law. The word felt grotesque now, for a long, steady moment. "I want to call Junho. He's in a board meeting." He asked not to be disturbed. Mrs. Park slid a business card across the table, a lawyer's card. "Take a few days. Think about what makes sense." Jisoo had still not looked up. Maya stood. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She did not beg or bargain or perform any of the emotions rioting in her chest. She took her passport from her room, her wallet, her speaker, her Falcons mug, and 4 months of her own salary in her own account. She left everything else. She walked out of the Park family home at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, and the door closed behind her with a sound that was so ordinary, so completely unremarkable, that it almost broke her. She took a bus, not because she couldn't afford a taxi, because she needed the time the bus would take to keep herself from fragmenting publicly. She sat in the back with her bag on her lap and looked out the window at Seoul, bright and crowded and completely unconcerned, and she held herself together with the specific grip of someone who knows that if they let go now, in public, they may not stop. She got off at the Han River. She sat on a bench near the water. She gave herself 30 minutes. She cried with the efficiency of a woman who understood she could not afford to be devastated indefinitely. Not ugly crying, not quiet crying, but the kind of crying that is really a negotiation with grief, with rage, with the part of herself that wanted to believe those messages were real because it was somehow less painful than the alternative. He let them do it. That was what she kept returning to. Not the setup, not the fabricated messages, not even Mrs. Park's architectural patience. Him. He had seen the distance growing and sent short messages. He had listened to his mother's planted seeds and filed them away. He had a mother and a sister and a housekeeper with access to her phone, and he had chosen to trust the family unit over following his instinct. He let them do it. She called her mother, Manga. Her mother knew immediately, the way mothers know things across 12 time zones and a Pacific Ocean. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. I'm leaving the house. Come home." "No." The word came out before she'd finished deciding it. "No. If I go home, it means they won." A pause. Then her mother, who had raised Maya to build things, not just to survive them, said simply, "Okay. What do you need?" "I need somewhere to stay tonight. I'm wiring money right now. Don't argue with me." "Mama." I said don't argue. "What else?" Maya looked at the river. "Nothing else tonight. I just needed to hear your voice. You've got as long as you need it, baby. Every Thursday and every not Thursday. You hear me? I hear you." She hung up, sat for another 5 minutes. Then she stood up, straightened her back, picked up her bag with the speaker and the Falcons mug, and started walking toward the nearest guest house. That night, in a room that smelled like industrial cleaning fluid and was approximately the size of a generous closet, she opened her laptop and created a new CV. The cursor blinked at her. She typed her name at the top. Maya Adiz Johnson. Her hands were completely steady. Park Junho landed at Incheon on a Thursday in February and knew something was wrong before his car had cleared the airport. Not because of anything said, because of the quality of his mother's silence on the phone when she told him Maya had left. There's silences that are sad, and silences that are relieved, and silences that are something else entirely, something that has practiced being sad. His mother's silence was the third kind. He did not say this. He filed it. He had been filing things for too long and had not yet acknowledged the cost of the habit. At the family home, his mother told him the story with perfect composure. Maya had seemed increasingly unsettled in her final weeks. The cultural adjustment had proven harder than they had hoped. She had been distant, uncommunicative. She had left a letter. Mrs. Park produced it, handwritten, polite, final. She had told them she needed to go back to her own life. She wished Junho well. He read the letter twice, then a third time. It was too neat. The phrasing was too resolved, too careful, each sentence landing without the specific texture of Maya's voice. Maya, when she wrote, had rhythm and wit and a tendency to undercut her own earnestness right at the moment it got too heavy. She wrote the way she talked, which was the way she thought. She wrote with heat in it, even when the heat was grief. This letter had no heat. It was the written equivalent of a room that has been cleaned very thoroughly by someone who wanted to make sure nothing was left behind. When did she leave? He asked. November, the 12th, and no one called me. She asked us not to, Mrs. Park said. Her voice was soft with what appeared to be helpless regret. She said she didn't want to disrupt the acquisition. She was very considerate. To the end, he looked at his mother. She held his gaze with the patience of someone who has prepared for this exact conversation. I want to call her, he said. Her number was disconnected. I want to call her, he said. Her number was disconnected. He contacted her company. She had resigned in November. No forwarding information. He reached 2 of her Korean colleagues. Both were evasive in the careful way of people who have been told a version of events they find easier to maintain than challenge. One of them, a woman named Park Hyejin, who had once come to dinner at Junho's invitation, told Amaya had seemed unhappy in her last months in Seoul. Something in the delivery was rehearsed. He hired a private investigator. 2 weeks later, the report came back. No current Korean address, believed to have returned to the United States. The investigation felt somehow unfinished, like a sentence with the last word removed. He escalated. His contact at the agency told him the available trail simply ended. Because the trail had been ended. He did not know this yet. He had one more card. He had kept it because using it felt like an admission that things were worse than he was ready to admit. He went through old email threads until he found the number. Mrs. Johnson, Atlanta, Georgia. The mother Maya called every Thursday without fail. He called on a Thursday evening. Mrs. Johnson, this is Park Junho. I'm looking for Maya. The silence on the line was not his mother's kind of silence. It was the silence of a woman deciding how much anger is appropriate for a stranger who doesn't yet understand what he did. She told me what happened. Mrs. Johnson's voice was measured, low, the register of a woman from whom Maya had clearly inherited her composure. She told me you let your family throw her out like she was nothing. That is not what happened. Then what happened? He opened his mouth. And here was the problem. He didn't fully know. He had a feeling strong enough to have hired an investigator, strong enough to be standing in his home office at midnight making international calls, but not yet a complete picture. I'm still trying to find out. I know my family. I think something happened that I wasn't told about. I believe Maya left under circumstances that weren't right. Another silence. Shorter this time. She doesn't want to be found, Mrs. Johnson said. I know. But I need to know she's okay. She's okay. Something in the woman's voice shifted, barely, almost imperceptibly. She's more than okay. My daughter builds things. That's what she does. A pause. You sound like a man who doesn't know what he did. I'm starting to think I know exactly what I didn't do, he said, which might be worse. The line was quiet for a moment. Then Mrs. Johnson said, I'm not telling you where she is. I'll tell her you called. That's all I can give you. The call ended. He stood in his office for a long time. Across 12 time zones, Mrs. Johnson called her daughter. Maya was in the small apartment she had moved into 3 months ago, cooking jollof rice on a Sunday because some rituals were non-negotiable, her speaker on the counter doing something by Burna Boy, and the specific low-level contentment of someone who has built a life from nothing and knows exactly what each piece of it cost. "That man called me," her mother said. The wooden spoon stopped stirring. "Mama, don't—" He asked if you were okay. He said he thinks something happened that he didn't know about. He sounded like a pause. He sounded like someone trying to find a door he accidentally closed, or like someone who's very good at performing regret. "Maya, I'm serious, Mama." He had months. He had months of me trying to reach him, of calls dropping and messages going short and something feeling wrong. And his response was to stop looking and go back to work. "Did you tell him directly that something was wrong?" The spoon resumed, slower. "I sent a message. In month 3, I said something doesn't feel right. And he said, 'Miss you too.'" Her mother made a sound that was not quite a sigh and not quite a word. "Baby, there's a specific kind of man who loves you fully and still manages to miss the fire until it's burned down half the house. That's not goodness, but it's also not what you decided he was. He stopped looking for me. He called me from Seoul at midnight looking for you." Silence. "That's not nothing," her mother said. "I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you not to be so sure about the story you've built that you can't hear when it might have a different ending." Maya hung up. She stood in her kitchen with the jollof rice and the Burna boy and the life she had made, and she felt something shift in the locked room where she kept him. Not open, not even ajar, but a hairline crack that she would not admit to anyone, including herself. She went back to stirring. Meanwhile, and this is what makes it worse, Junho confronted his mother directly for the first time that week. Not with proof, but with the specific weight of a man who has run out of alternative explanations. He sat across from her in the living room, Jisoo present, and said, "Did you do something to make Maya leave?" Mrs. Park's performance was, as always, immaculate. She was hurt. She was bewildered. She was grieving, she said, too. She had grown to care about Maya, and this departure had shaken all of them. She produced the letter again. She had Jisoo confirm. Maya had seemed unhappy. Maya had made her own choice. No one had pushed. No one had interfered. Jisoo confirmed it. She was still telling herself it was probably true. It had become necessary to her functioning, this belief. Without it, she would have to look at her own reflection and ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. Junho looked at his sister, then at his mother, then at the letter he still didn't fully believe. He backed down, not because he believed them, because he had no proof. And confronting a family with accusations without proof, in this house, with this mother who had built the family's entire social structure on the appearance of decency, felt like burning the village to test whether it was real. He stopped actively searching. He went to his office and worked 16-hour days and did not speak about Maya to anyone. He did not pursue Yuna. He did not move on. He simply stopped. The way you stop bleeding, not because you've healed, but because you've run out. He put the engagement ring in his desk drawer, and he closed it. That was his failure. Complete. It is important to sit with that for a moment, because it would be easy, comfortable, even to make him simply a victim of his family's manipulation. And he was that. But he was also a man who had a feeling, strong and persistent, that the woman he loved had not left willingly. And he chose, at the critical moment, to stop following that feeling because following it would have required him to burn something down. He chose the structure over the person. He didn't know he was doing it. He did it anyway. And Maya, in her small apartment with her rebuilt life, was paying for that choice every single day without knowing its cost had been made by him. 8 months passed. Maya rose through the Hanul's front-of-house staff with the efficiency of someone who understood that excellence was the best form of refusal. Refusal to be defined by what had been done to her. Refusal to let this city swallow her without knowing what she tasted like first. She started as a general floor attendant. Within 6 weeks, Director Lim, a woman of few words and excellent judgment, moved her to the international VIP section because, as she told her deputy, she makes guests feel seen without making them feel handled, which is either a gift or very expensive training, and I don't care which. Guests began requesting her specifically. She was promoted to senior front of house within 4 months. She was good at her job. That had never been the question. What was different now was that she let herself be excellent without apologizing for it. The Park House had spent 4 months trying to teach her that her competence was a problem. She had spent 8 months unlearning the lesson. She had a life. Sua, her colleague, saved her the good shift schedule and never asked too many questions, which in Maya's experience was the purest form of friendship. She had her apartment, her Sunday ritual, her Thursday calls, her Falcons mug that had survived everything and stood on her kitchen counter like a small monument to continuity. The apartment she had found herself and furnished slowly. A floor lamp from a Sunday market in Itaewon. A print on the wall. A painting by a Nigerian artist. All warm color and unapologetic presence. A small succulent suwa had given her with the solemnity of someone administering a friendship test. If you can keep this alive, I'll trust you with real conversation. The succulent was thriving. She cooked jollof rice every Sunday. This was not only nostalgia. It was a statement. In a house where her preferences had been inconveniences, her Sunday rice was an act of weekly self-assertion. It smelled like home. It meant she was still herself, fully, even here, even after everything. She called her mother every Thursday. "Do you think," she said one Thursday in January, choosing her words carefully, "it's possible to forgive someone for a failure that wasn't quite a choice? He didn't choose to abandon me. He chose to stop looking, which is different, but it still left me alone on a bench in the dark." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Forgiveness isn't about what people deserve," she said finally. "It's about what you're willing to carry. If you carry that anger for him, it lives in your body. If you put it down, you get to decide what goes there instead." A pause. But putting it down doesn't mean picking him back up. Those are two very different things. Maya sat with that for a long time after the call ended. She followed Park Group, News the Way You Press a Bruise, regularly, telling herself each time she'd stop, never stopping. She saw Junho's name in business articles, saw the acquisition had been successful. Of course it had. He was brilliant and relentless, and the only thing that had ever genuinely distracted him was her. Saw him photographed at industry events, always composed, always slightly contained in a way she recognized, the look of someone managing their own absence. She did not reach out. She had her reasons, and they were good ones, and she repeated them to herself sometimes. You are not waiting for rescue. You are not a footnote in someone else's story. You built this. It is yours. She believed it. She had to believe it. Belief was infrastructure. But there were Thursday nights, after the call with her mother, when she would sit on her small balcony with tea and look at the Seoul skyline, that impossible lit-up sprawl, and let herself feel, privately and briefly, and with complete permission, that she had loved him, that she might still, that loving someone who failed you and missing someone who let you down were not the same thing, and she was allowed to feel both without acting on either. She gave herself exactly one song's worth of feeling, whatever was playing on the playlist she'd made in November and never deleted. Then she'd go inside, wash the mug, and go to sleep. She was managing him. There is a difference between managing something and being free of it. She knew the difference. She just wasn't ready for it to matter yet. What she didn't know was that 16 floors above this city that hides everything, Park Junho was doing his own version of the same thing. Working 16-hour days, attending every event he could justify, filling the hours until they stopped being something to survive and started resembling a life. He was not okay. He was functional, which is what happens to people who are not okay, but have board meetings. His assistant Soyeon, who had worked for him 3 years and had the intuition of someone paid to anticipate his needs, had quietly removed the framed photo from his desk in December. The one from Maya's birthday dinner, both of them laughing at something the camera missed, and placed it in his drawer without being asked. He hadn't mentioned it. She hadn't mentioned it. They both simply knew. The engagement ring was still in the drawer too. He had opened that drawer probably 400 times in 8 months. He had not moved the ring. It mattered on a Thursday evening in April at the Hanol when a high-stakes industry dinner came through and Junho Park was on the reservation list. She didn't see his name. She rarely checked the full guest list for events. Her job was the floor, not the seating chart. She was working the room on the opposite side when the primary table filled. She moved with the efficiency of someone who had learned to be present and invisible simultaneously, the specific grace of excellent service, which is really just the discipline of making other people feel like the most important person in the room. She carried a drinks tray to the primary table, set a glass at the far end, moved along, set another, reached the seat near the head of the table, leaned in slightly to set the glass down without disturbing the conversation. Turned to leave. Maya. One word. Her name. She stopped. The room continued around her. Conversation, clinking glass, the ambient sound of important people being important. But something had happened to the air in the precise cubic meter where she was standing. A density shift. An alteration. She turned. And there he was. There he was. He looked exactly like himself, which was the devastating thing about it. Not diminished, not different, not the way you sometimes fantasize that the person who broke your life will have been marked by it. Just Junho, the same face, the same eyes that could argue a position and laugh at themselves in the same conversation. Looking at her with an expression she had never seen on him in public. Raw, unguarded, like a window that had been bricked over for months and had just, unexpectedly, been opened. 3 seconds. She gave herself 3 seconds to be human. Then the mask came up, professional, composed, impenetrable, built over 8 months of days she had no one to fall apart in front of. Good evening, sir. Enjoy your dinner. She walked away. Her hands did not shake, not even slightly. And in the 8 steps it took her to clear the table and reach the service corridor, she breathed once, twice, and said to herself, in the voice she reserved for the hardest things, "You are fine. You are fine. You built this life, and it is yours, and you are fine." She was not fine. Right now, if this story is hitting you somewhere real, hit that like button. Comment below what you felt when their eyes met. It genuinely helps more people find this story. Now, let's keep going, because it's about to get so much harder before it gets better. He excused himself from the table inside 90 seconds. His colleague grabbed his arm. Junho, the Day One CEO, is about to speak, and Junho said, without looking back, "I'll be 2 minutes," in the voice he used when he had made a decision, and the decision was not negotiable. He followed her into the service corridor. It was quieter here. Fluorescent lighting, the faint sound of the kitchen, the utilitarian back-of-house reality behind the hotel's polished front. Maya was walking fast, tray under her arm, toward the staff station. "Maya, stop." She kept walking. "Please." She stopped, not because she was asked to, because she had decided, in the 8 steps from the table to the corridor, that running was not who she was anymore, and she would not let him make it who she was. She turned. Her face was professional and entirely shut. "Whatever you need to say it, and let me get back to work." He stood 6 feet from her. He didn't reach for her. He looked at her with the specific attention of a man cataloging every detail of a person he had spent 8 months being terrified he would never see again. "You look," he started. "Don't," she said. He stopped. "I'll look for you," he said instead. Something moved behind her eyes. Controlled immediately. "I called your company. I called your colleagues. I hired someone to find you." He paused. "I called your mother." That landed. Her chin lifted slightly, an involuntary response, the tell of someone who didn't expect that particular piece of information. "She told me what you believed," he said, "that I let them do it, that I agreed to end things and said nothing. She told me you sounded like someone who didn't know what he did." Maya's voice was even and cool. "I told her that sounded like a man who's good at performing regret." What if it sounded like that because it's true? Which part? The not knowing. She looked at him. "Junho, your mother sat me at a table in your house and presented fabricated evidence that I stole from your family. Then she showed me messages on my own phone with your name on them, telling me you had decided to end our engagement. And then she gave me a choice between leaving quietly or having a theft accusation go to your company board." She delivered this without raising her voice, as though she were reading from a document. "I made my choice. I left." His face was doing several things that he was working very hard to contain. "And you believe the messages," he said. It was not an accusation. It was a man trying to understand something about the woman he loved. I believe the 4 months before the messages, she said. The drop calls, the seed she planted, the distance that appeared in your responses like someone had been. She stopped. The messages confirmed what had already been built to feel inevitable. That's how it works. That's how she works. They were fabricated. The corridor was very quiet. What? I never wrote those messages. His voice was completely flat. I did not send them. I did not agree to end our engagement. I came home, and they told me you had left voluntarily, and I didn't. He stopped. Took a breath. I didn't fully believe it. I want you to know that. I searched for you for weeks. And then you stopped. The silence this time was a verdict, and they both knew it. And then I stopped, he said. He did not excuse it. He did not dress it in explanation or context. He said it plainly because she deserved plainness. I had a feeling something was wrong. I had that feeling from the first day they told me you left. I followed it as far as I could without dismantling everything. And then I made a choice that I will spend whatever time you give me trying to account for. I stopped. Maya looked at him. This was the moment, not the restaurant, not the seeing of his face, but this moment right here. Because this was where the story she had survived on could either hold or crack. She had built the last 8 months on a specific architecture or belief. He chose them. He let them win. She was right to leave and right to stay gone. And he was standing here telling her the messages were lies, and the choice to stop looking was his failure, not his decision. And it made sense. God help her, it made a kind of terrible restructuring sense that she had been afraid of ever since her mother said he called me at midnight. Because if the messages were fabricated and he genuinely searched and the family blocked every path, then the 8 months of surviving hadn't been necessary. And that meant she had rebuilt herself on a foundation of a lie someone else constructed. And that was a different kind of grief entirely. Don't, she said, and her voice finally fractured at the very edge. Don't tell me that if it isn't the truth. Because she stopped, pressed her lips together. I built a whole life on what I believed happened. I got up off a bench by the Han River at night with nothing in my hands, and I built something from zero. Don't stand here and tell me it was all based on a lie unless you were completely certain. I am completely certain. His voice was so quiet. I never stopped loving you for one day. Not one. She cried. Not the crying she had done on the bench. That was survival. That was triage. This was something different. This was 8 months of held together releasing at once in a fluorescent lit service corridor, while 40 important people sat 40 feet away. This was the specific collapse of a woman who has been strong for so long that being allowed to not be strong feels like falling. She didn't reach for him. He didn't reach for her either, not at first. He stood close, and he let her choose. And after a moment that felt very long, she stepped forward. He held her, not dramatically, not desperately, with the specific, careful tenderness of a man who understands he is holding something precious that he nearly lost permanently and had some responsibility in nearly losing. Tell me everything, he said into her hair. It's a long story, she said, voice muffled. I have time. You have a dinner. I don't care about the dinner. She almost laughed. Not quite. Close enough to feel it. Of course you don't care about the dinner. This is exactly the kind of thing you do. She stopped. Steadied. Okay, I'll tell you. She did. All of it. The separate meals, and the Wi-Fi router, and the planted seeds, and the family meeting, and the manufacture paper trail, and the phone placed on the table, and the messages she had believed because the ground had been so carefully prepared for her to believe them. She told it without dramatics, without embellishment, in the voice of someone who had processed this story alone for 8 months, and was now, for the first time, telling it to the person who needed to hear it most. Junho listened. His face moved through anger and grief, and something that looked like the precise moment a person comprehends the full dimensions of their own failure. Not just what was done to Maya, but what he had not done. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I'm going home, he said. Junho. Not to you. I'll come back to you. But I'm going home first. She looked at him steadily. Don't make it a scene. I won't. I mean it. Your mother is calculated. If you go in screaming, she'll find a way to make you the problem. He looked at her. This woman who had been systematically destroyed by his family and was standing in a service corridor giving him strategic advice about how to confront them. He felt something that was not a simple emotion, something compound and permanent. "You're remarkable," he said. "I know," she said. Then, because she was Maya, "Go fix your family. I have 6 more tables." He left. She watched him go. She stood alone in the corridor for exactly 10 seconds, the amount of time it takes to rebuild the mask, and then she walked back out onto the floor. Suah appeared at her elbow 30 seconds later with the focused look of someone who had absolutely seen something and was deciding how much to say. "Are you okay?" "Perfectly fine," Maya said. "You were crying." "Allergies. We're indoors. Aggressive allergies." She picked up her tray. "Table 12 needs the wine list." Suah stared at her for a moment. Then, in the Korean equivalent of girl, "I have so many questions, but I also respect the game. Table 12. "Got it." Junho arrived home at 11 p.m. Mrs. Park, Jisoo, and, by the specific providence of a story that needed a witness, Uncle Singwoo, who had returned from his business trip to Busan that afternoon, were in the living room. A domestic scene. Tea, the television low, the appearance of a family at rest. Junho sat down. He placed Maya's phone on the table. He opened the fabricated message thread and turned the screen so it faced the room. He did not raise his voice once. This is important. Screaming is easy to dismiss. You can call it hysteria, emotion, overreaction. Calm is not dismissible. Calm is a man who has made a decision and is informing you of it. Calm is the most frightening register a person can use when they have every right to be something else. "I need someone in this room to explain this to me," he said. Mrs. Park began her performance. The bewilderment, the sadness, the loving concern. She got approximately 40 seconds in before Junho said, without inflection, "Stop." She stopped. "I'm not asking for an explanation of what happened. I know what happened. I spoke to Maya tonight. I have the full account. I'm telling you what I know so that there is no version of tonight where anyone in this family believes I don't know the complete picture." He looked at his mother. "You staged a theft accusation with manufactured evidence. You had her phone tampered with. You fabricated messages from my number and showed them to her as proof I had withdrawn from our engagement. You gave her a choice between leaving or being publicly disgraced. You then blocked every avenue I used to try to find her." Mrs. Park. "Junho, yeah, I did what was necessary for this fam. You did what was necessary for your plan." Still quiet. "There is a significant difference between this family and your plan, and what happened in this house is what happens when someone loses the ability to see that difference." He looked at Jisoo. Jisoo had gone pale. "You were in the room," Junho said to his sister. "You watched. You confirmed her departure to me as voluntary." "I thought," Jisoo started. "You chose not to think," Junho said. "Not brutally, with the specific sadness of someone who had hoped for better. You chose the story that was easier to live with. I know the difference." Uncle Sangwoo had not moved or spoken. He was watching with the still attention of a man building an internal record. "Junho Sotod. I'm going to marry Maya Johnson. That decision was made before I left for New York, and what happened in this house does not change it. What I need from this family is simple. You can be present for my life, conducted with the basic dignity this family claims as its standard, or you can be absent from it entirely. There is no negotiation between those two positions." He picked up the phone. "I won't be sleeping here tonight." He walked out. The living room was very quiet. Uncle Sangwoo looked at Mrs. Park. He looked at her for a long moment with the expression of a man who has known someone for 30 years and is recalibrating what that knowledge means. "You know what you did?" he said. Not a question, not an accusation, a simple acknowledgement. Mrs. Park's jaw tightened slightly. "You know what it cost," he said, "and it is going to cost more before it is finished." He stood. "I'll talk to the board." He left the room. Mrs. Park sat in the living room that she had constructed, furnished, and controlled for 20 years. The notebook was upstairs. Every item on the list had been completed. Every move had been executed with precision. Her son had come home. The Yun alliance had been waiting. The foreign woman had been removed without scandal. Every piece was in place, and the outcome was ash. The day after the confrontation, CEO Yuna heard through the network of connected families that form Seoul's upper social stratum exactly what had transpired. She heard the version that circulated publicly, that Junho had confronted his family over the treatment of his fiancée. And then she heard from someone who had been at the family home that night and was not good at keeping things to themselves, the fuller version. She sat with it for 2 days. On the third day, she called Mrs. Park. Iamianum, the honorific, now, felt like something she was returning. I heard what happened. It's being managed, Mrs. Park said. I don't think it can be managed, Eunice said quietly. I want you to know that I played no part in what was done. I knew you prefer me for Junho. I never asked you to. I never wanted anything built on someone else's ruin. Junho, I hope he's happy. Her voice was careful and genuine. I mean that. I genuinely hope he's happy. A pause. I think we should let this end cleanly. The line went quiet. Goodbye, Iamianum. The call ended. Mrs. Park sat with the phone in her hand. The CO alliance. 2 years of patient construction, the cornerstone of a decade-long social strategy, was over. Yuna had not been taken from her. Yuna had left, which was different and somehow more complete. Jisoo, meanwhile, did something that no one had told her to do and no one had asked for. 3 days after the confrontation, she took the train to the neighborhood she knew Maya worked in. She had done this quietly, without telling her mother. She sat in a coffee shop across the street from the Hanul for 40 minutes, working up to something. Then she went in and asked for Maya at the front desk, said her name, Park Jisoo, and sat in the lobby and waited. Maya came out on her break 15 minutes later. She saw Jisoo and stopped. Her expression was not warm. It was not cold either. It was the expression of a woman who is deciding how much energy a situation deserves. She sat down across from her. Jisoo had prepared things to say. She had rehearsed. In the actual moment, everything she had prepared felt insufficient in a way that was probably the point. I told myself I wasn't sure, Jisoo said. That maybe it was true, maybe there had been a misunderstanding, maybe you had taken the money and I hadn't seen it. I told myself that because it was easier than looking at what I actually knew. She stopped. I knew you. I lived with you for 4 months. I knew who you were the morning you came down and politely declined my mother's attempt to separate you from the table. I knew who you were the night of the family gathering, when I told you Yuna was just a family friend, and you looked at me and very gently did not believe me. Something crossed her face. I knew who you were, and I said nothing. Maya looked at her. The lobby of the Hanul hummed gently around them. Guests, staff, the low music, the curated normalcy of an expensive hotel. Why are you here? Maya asked. Because I needed you to know that I know what my silence cost you. Not Junho, not my family. You. Jisoo met her eyes directly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think that's what this is. I needed you to know I see it. Well, I did. Maya was quiet for a moment. Your silence gave her credibility, Maya said finally. When Junho came back and asked, you confirmed it. You were the corroboration. She said this without anger. As a fact, if you'd said nothing or even hesitated, I know. Do you? Yes. Jisoo's voice was steady. I know. Maya looked at this woman, Junho's sister, 26, who had chosen comfort over courage at the critical moment and was now sitting in a hotel lobby absorbing the full weight of that choice. She did not feel warmth toward her. She did not feel forgiveness, not yet. What she felt was something more complicated, a recognition that people make the smaller choice and then have to live in the architecture of it. And the only thing worth anything was when they came back to look at it clearly. You're going to have to find a way to tell Junho specifically what you confirmed and when, Maya said. Not for me. For him. Jisoo nodded. That's going to cost you with your mother. I know that too. Maya stood. Break was almost over. I don't know what we are to each other yet, she said. But I heard you. She paused. That took something. I'm aware of that. She walked back to the floor. Jisoo sat in the lobby for another few minutes. Then she took the train home and walked in her mother's house and told Mrs. Park that she had gone to see Maya. Mrs. Park looked at her daughter with the specific expression of a woman recalibrating an alliance she thought was secure. She did not speak to Jisoo for 11 days. Jisoo did not apologize for going. This was, in its quiet way, the beginning of the rest of Jisoo's life. Uncle Sangwoo made calls. Not dramatic calls. Not threatening calls. He was 61 years old and had been a senior figure in Seoul's business community for 2 decades. And what he understood, what Mrs. Park had perhaps never fully understood, despite her considerable intelligence, was that power operated most effectively when it appeared not to be operating at all. He spoke to 3 board members of Park Group over the following 2 weeks. He spoke to 2 family associates with whom the CEO family had overlapping business interests. He spoke to 1 social connection who sat on a charity board that Mrs. Park chaired. In each conversation, nothing explicit was said. What was communicated, in the way that such things are communicated in rooms where everyone understands the subtext, was that recent family matters had been resolved, that Park Group's leadership was sound, and that certain proposed alliances would be proceeding differently than previously anticipated. The CEO partnership quietly redirected. 2 social initiatives Mrs. Park had been cultivating dried up without explanation. An invitation to a significant charity event, one she had attended for 7 consecutive years, did not arrive. She was not destroyed. She was not publicly humiliated. She was quietly and efficiently diminished, reduced by exactly the degree that her actions warranted in the currency she valued most. It was, in its way, a perfect consequence. Proportional, invisible, and permanent. She understood what was happening. She understood who had made it happen. And she understood, perhaps for the first time in the 30 years since she had married into this family and begun constructing her position within it, that there were architectures older and stronger than hers. She did not contact Maya. She was not ready for that, and she was not pretending to be. What she did, instead, was go quiet. She withdrew from the campaign. The notebook, at some point, disappeared from the sitting room shelf. Junho did not ask where it had gone. The weeks that followed the confrontation were not easy weeks, but they were real ones. Junho showed up in Maya's life with the specific humility of a man who understood he had lost the right to make demands. He did not ask her to come to the family home. He did not ask her to forgive anyone on a timeline. He showed up where she was, her neighborhood, her coffee shop, the park near her apartment, and he was consistent in a way that was clearly costing him something, which is the only way consistency means anything. He met Sua, who looked at him with the pointed assessment of a woman who had watched her friend rebuild herself from nothing and was not prepared to see that work undone by a man with good cheekbones and a guilty conscience. How long did it take you to stop looking for her? Sua asked him at a coffee that Maya had arranged and immediately regretted arranging because she could see exactly what was happening. Junho, Maya started. About 6 weeks, he said. He held Sua's gaze. Sua looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Maya, then back at him. I see, she said, in a tone that meant, I see you, I do not yet approve of you, and you should be aware of both. He was not approved by Sua in that conversation. He did not expect to be. He showed up for a second coffee, and a third, and at some point Sua stopped looking at him like a threat assessment and started looking at him like a person, which was its own kind of progress. Maya called her mother on a Thursday. As always, without fail. I've been seeing him, she said. I know, her mother said. How do you know? Because you sound different. Not happy yet, but not armored. Does that make sense? Maya considered. Yeah, that makes sense. How do you feel? Scared, she said, which was the most honest thing she had said out loud in months. I built the whole last 8 months on being sure I was right to leave. And I was right to leave. I want to be clear about that. But the reason I left was a lie, and now I have to figure out what it means to want someone again when wanting someone is the thing that made me vulnerable in the first place. Her mother was quiet for a moment. You know what I think? Tell me. I think the woman who sat on that bench and didn't go home, she's the one who gets to decide this. Not the woman who left. Not the woman who was hurt. The one who stayed. Maya thought about that for a long time after she hung up. One evening, walking near the Han River. It was May now, the evenings longer, the river lit with the kind of soft gold that Seoul produced, sometimes like an apology for being so hard the rest of the time. They stopped near a bench. Junho didn't know which bench. How would he know? But Maya stopped and looked at it with an expression he couldn't read. "What is it?" he asked. She looked at the bench, at the river, at the ordinary, unremarkable wood, and the Han flowing past it as though that night in November had been nothing at all. "This is where I sat," she said, "the night I left your house. I gave myself 30 minutes. A pause. I called my mother from this bench. He was very still. She told me to come home. Maya's voice was quiet, not broken, retrospective. I said no. He didn't say anything for a long moment. There are things you can put into words and things you cannot, and the image of her on that bench alone at night with nothing in her hands after what his family had done was the second kind. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," he said finally. Not a speech, not an accounting, just that. She nodded. They stood by the river until the gold light faded. This scene right here, this is the turning point. If you stayed with this story this far, you already know it's something special. Subscribe to the channel right now and drop a comment telling us, should Maya take him back? The debate in the comments is real, and we read every single one. Don't leave yet. The ending is worth everything. Junho arranged an engagement dinner 6 weeks later. He did not ask his mother's permission. He told her. There was a distinction, and she heard it. He called her on a Tuesday evening, and he was not unkind, but he was immovable, like a door that has been welded shut and is not going to respond to knocking. "I'm having dinner on Saturday. Maya will be there. The family will be there. I would like you to be there as well, and I would like you to conduct yourself in the way our family claims to conduct itself." A pause. "If that's not something you can do, I understand. But I won't be rearranging it." The silence on his mother's end of the phone lasted 7 seconds. He counted. "I'll be there," she said. She came. She wore a dress that had been selected with considerable care. Dark navy, formal, without being severe, the sartorial equivalent of a controlled apology. Her face cost her throughout the evening. You could see it if you were watching. The specific effort of a woman who is accustomed to holding every room she enters, maintaining a posture of gracious civility that she does not feel and cannot fake entirely. There were moments when she looked at Maya, across the table, with an expression that cycled through several things in quick succession before landing on something neutral. Maya saw it. She said nothing. She had decided before arriving that this dinner was not the venue for scores. The score was already settled elsewhere, in board meetings and withdrawn invitations, and a partnership that no longer existed. This dinner was about the future, not the accounting of the past, and she came prepared to be exactly who she was without apology and without aggression. She wore red, not performatively. She liked red, and it was her engagement dinner, and she wore what she wanted. Jisoo, arriving before Maya, had watched her mother's face when Maya walked in. She had watched it carefully, and she had made a decision in that moment. Not the decision of someone overcoming something dramatic, but the quieter decision of someone choosing daily to see clearly. She crossed the room and said to Maya, "You look beautiful," in a voice that meant several things simultaneously, all of them honest. Maya looked at her. "Thank you, Jisuya." She had used the informal address without planning to. It hung between them for a moment. Then Jisa nodded, and they both moved toward the table, and that was enough for one evening. Uncle Sangwoo arrived last, as he often did, with the unhurried confidence of a man who understands that his presence rather than his punctuality is what matters. He shook Junho's hand. He kissed Maya on the cheek, a gesture that was not Korean and was very deliberate, and which caused a barely perceptible shift in Mrs. Park's expression that Sangwoo absolutely saw and absolutely intended. He toasted with the economy of a man who means everything he says and therefore says as little as possible. "You are exactly who this family needed," he said, looking at Maya. "Welcome, and I'm sorry it took so long." Maya looked at him. "Thank you for what you did." "I did what was right," he said simply. "I'm sorry it needed doing." Mrs. Park, at the far end of the table, lifted her glass. Her hand was completely steady. Whatever it cost her, it was internal, and she kept it there. You had to give her that. Dinner proceeded. It was not easy, and it was not warm, but it was real, which was more than could have been said for most of the dinners that had happened in this house over the past year. People talked. Food was eaten. Wine was poured. At one point, Junho said something quietly to Maya that made her exhale through her nose in a way that was almost a laugh. something private, some small joke that lived only between them. And Mrs. Park watched her son's face in that moment with an expression that was complicated in ways she would probably spend a long time sitting with. At some point in the evening, Jisoo found herself standing near Maya at the window that looked out over the garden. The garden where Maya had once stood trying to get a reliable Wi-Fi signal to call Junho. Neither of them mentioned that. They stood holding glasses and looking out at the same view from completely different histories of it. "You didn't have to come tonight," Jisoo said. "I know," Maya said. "I'm glad you did." Maya considered. "I'm working on glad," she said. "Right now I'm at here. Here's a start." Jisoo almost smiled. Maya did smile, briefly, to herself, looking out at the garden that was just a garden now. "For what it's worth," Jisoo said, "I'm going to spend a long time trying to be better than I was. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I want you to know I'm not. I'm not the person I was in that room. I'm trying not to be." "I know," Maya said again. And she did know. She had been watching. That's all any of us can do. They stood in companionable, complicated, genuine silence until Junho appeared and put his hand on the small of Maya's back and said dinner was continuing and she should come eat the second course before his mother's chef suffered a professional collapse. "He's very intense about the second course," Maya told Jisoo. "He once called the kitchen at 2 a.m. because he remembered we were out of doenjang," Jisoo said. "He did not. He absolutely did." Maya looked at Junho. "You called the kitchen at 2 a.m. about fermented soybean paste." "It was a legitimate concern," Junho said, completely without shame. They went back to the table. Seo Yuna was not at the dinner. But the following week Maya received a message from a number she didn't have saved but recognized immediately. "I wanted to say congratulations. I hope you are genuinely happy. I mean that sincerely. E." Maya sat with it for a moment. Then she replied, "Thank you. I believe you." She looked at the message thread for another moment, then added, "You deserved better than being a piece in someone else's game." She sent it before she could second-guess the honesty of it. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "We both did. Take care of yourself, Maya SSI." Maya put the phone down and picked up her spoon and finished her jollof rice because it was Sunday and some rituals held regardless of everything else. Some wounds close with a word, if the word is honest enough and offered freely enough. She hoped Yuna found something good. She thought she probably would. She had the look of someone who, freed from someone else's plan, would have very interesting ideas about her own. Junho drove Maya home after the dinner. They sat outside her building in the car with the engine off and Seoul moving around them the way Seoul always does, busy and indifferent and beautiful, conducting itself with complete disregard for the small specific weight of what had just happened in a dining room across the city. "How do you feel?" he asked. She thought about it properly rather than answering immediately. "Tired. In a good way. The way you're tired when something hard is finished." "Is it finished?" "The hardest part." She turned slightly in the seat to look at him. "You understand this isn't a resolution. This is a beginning of something that takes years." "I know. Your mother is not going to wake up changed." Tonight was civil because she understood the cost of the alternative. "That's not the same as changed." "I know," he said again. "Jisoo has a long road. She's trying. I'm not dismissing that. But try is different from arrived, and I need you to know I'm going to hold the distinction because I have to. You're allowed to. And there are going to be moments, family events, dinners, occasions, where I'm in a room with people who were part of what happened to me, and I'm going to have to decide every single time what that costs me. Sometimes I'll stay. Sometimes I won't. And when I leave, it will not be about you." "I understand." She looked at him steadily. "Show me," she said. Not harshly, just clearly. "Not tonight. That's not what tonight is. But over time, show me you understand the difference between loving someone and protecting them. Because that's the only thing I actually need from you. Not grand gestures. Not the ring. Not the speech. Show me you understand that difference in the way you act on a Tuesday when nothing is at stake." Something settled in his face. Not resolution exactly, more like recognition. The look of a person who has been told the exact true thing and knows it. "I can do that," he said. "I know you can." And she meant it. She would not have been in this car if she didn't mean it. She got out. He got out. She turned. And here's where the story ends. Not at the table, not at the hotel, not at the bench by the river, but here. Outside a building in a city that had tried to swallow her and hadn't managed it. In front of a man who had failed her and was learning what accounting for that looked like. She looked at him in the streetlight. Come up, she said. Not as forgiveness. Not as resolution. As a choice, clean and voluntary and entirely her own, made by a woman who had survived everything this city and this family had built to break her, and who is still here, and who is allowed, on her own terms and in her own time, to decide what came next. He followed her in. The elevator was small. They stood side by side, watching the numbers. Your mother is not going to make this easy, Maya said to the elevator doors. No, he agreed. Your sister has real work ahead of her. Yes. Your uncle, on the other hand, a pause, is a genuinely excellent human being, and I would like him at every family event from now on as a kind of moral ballast. He would love that description. Don't tell him I said it. It'll go to his head. She considered. Actually, tell him. He's earned it. I want him at the wedding. A silence. Not her voice. His. He had said it before he planned to, which was perhaps why it landed so squarely. No performance. Just a man saying something true. She looked at the elevator doors. Something was happening at the corner of her mouth. That's very presumptuous, she said. I know. I haven't agreed to a wedding. I know that too. I haven't even agreed to an engagement. Technically, the engagement was never. Junho. Yes. Stop talking. Stopping. The elevator opened. She walked out. He followed at the exact right distance, close enough to be present, far enough to be giving her the lead. She noticed. He had been getting better at that. The specific calibration of presence without pressure. She had been noticing without saying so. She unlocked the door. The apartment opened to them, warm and lived in and entirely hers. The Falcon's mug on the counter, a small monument to everything she had carried through the city. The speaker in its corner. The Nigerian print on the wall, all unapologetic color. The succulent that Suwa had given her as a friendship test, thriving on the windowsill. The smell of Sunday's jollof rice still faintly in the air, even on a Saturday. The life she had built. From nothing. On a Tuesday night in November in a guest house room, with a cursor blinking and her name at the top of a blank document. He stood in the doorway, and he saw it. Not just an apartment, but all of it, the full weight of what he was looking at. 8 months. The bench. The CV. Every morning she had gotten up in a city that had taken everything from her and decided, again, to be excellent. He looked at her. You're remarkable, he said. The same words as the corridor. Completely different weight. I know, she said. The same words, too. Then, come in. I'll make tea. And then you can tell me exactly what kind of man you intend to be for the next 50 years, because I'm going to need specifics. That's a long brief, he said, stepping inside. I have all night. He came in. The door closed. Outside, Seoul moved and glittered and continued completely without them, the way great cities do. Inside, the Atlanta Falcons mug caught the kitchen light. Still here. Still standing. Still hers. That's the story of Maya and Junho. And if it stayed with you, if you felt something in that corridor, or at that bench, or in the elevator, then this channel is exactly where you need to be. Subscribe right now, so you never miss a story like this one. Drop in the comments, what was the moment that hit you hardest? And share this with someone who needs to hear a story about a woman who refused to be broken. We'll see you in the next one.